Hello everyone and welcome back to See Through Panel. I am the head, your co-host, and my guest today is Benedict Abbit. He is an illustrator based in Kent. He recently graduated from the University of Creative Arts and he has a passion for drawing, making comic books about science fiction and horror. And hello Benedict, how are you doing today?
Hey, great, thank you.
We'll kind of get straight into the questions. So you've recently graduated from the University of Creative Arts. How's kind of that experience for you?
The uni itself was great. During COVID and stuff, obviously it's like massive pain because you just we were just stuck in our room the whole time. So I suppose one of the most annoying things about it was we were shelling out $9,000 a year and not being able to use the majority of the resources that pays for. But, you know, it's like sort of out of everybody's hands at that point.
And you did a degree in illustration and animation. How does that work? Do you work on different styles of illustration and animation? Do you specifically choose what you're going to be studying?
Yeah. So a lot of it was about focusing on sort of refining what you've already got. So like I've been drawing since I was a kid, like literally as long as I can remember. So my focus was pretty much always on drawing. There are some people who went there just for the animations and only made animations and stuff.
So I was just reading a little from your university's showcase page, and it kind of mentioned that you've always loved comics, and kind of some of your influences are kind of Ralph Steadman and Dave McKean and Junji Ito as well. I read your longer piece Mindlurker, and I could kind of definitely see those influences in there. Do you want to tell people a little bit about the Mindlurker comic? From what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's a comic book that you're looking to actually publish and put on sale.
I would have published Mindlurker straight after graduating because that was my final major project, and the intention with that was, well, I want to create something that I can then take into the real world and use as sort of like a launching pad to get my career fully up and running, as I've been doing printmaking and other stuff in the meantime, but obviously I want to do comics. But I'm going back and I'm adding to it.
Okay.
Is there some storylines that had to be taken out because of time and things like that? So I'm finishing it off before I send it out, basically.
Are you going to be self-publishing that, or are you going to be looking for a publisher to kind of publish it as a one shot?
At the moment, my thoughts are maybe self-publishing, but I am looking into finding a publisher to bring it out as a one shot.
Okay, yeah. From my personal, well, not my personal experience, just the experience of some other people I'm following on Twitter online. I think a lot of people are going down the self-publishing route, and especially with things like Kickstarter and Patreon. You've retained a lot more control over the profit and the end product and rights and stuff. A company which I shall not name has been all over Twitter, comic books Twitter, about their shady practices. But yeah, it's a tough decision to make, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's almost like if you go with a publisher, it's like, you know, it's going to be seen because people will be buying that comic because they know the publisher and stuff. Whereas, but yeah, like you say, with self-publishing, you get a lot more control over what happens to that project and things, which personally, I would prefer, I think.
Just looking over the stuff that you've got in portfolio on your website, a few of the things that did kind of come through for me, and themes around mental health, and there's a quite a strong strain of like weird humor running through there as well. So are those two things that get your creative gears going?
Yeah. I suppose it's something I think about quite a lot. Is Mindlurker is about unresolved trauma, mostly about recovering from like drug addiction and stuff. I quite like writers like Adrian Tomina and stuff as well, where they draw on personal, very real experiences to write from. And for Mindlurker, I decided to take things out of my own history and create a fiction around it. So the mental health and stuff, you know, my life's been quite impacted by mental health, not just like my own, but others and things like that. And I suppose like the weird humor, it's almost like while I'm also acknowledging how horrible that can be, I am also laughing it off in a way, because
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of makes it, you make light of a situation, it becomes much easier to deal with. And I also think, or at least I kept getting told at uni, that my work is very dark. There's always this this air of like darkness to it that I don't always recognize. So I try to put some humor in there.
I think it's slightly the Tim Burton effect there. I mean, there is undoubtedly dark themes in some of the work that your work that I've read. Tim Burton uses dark gothic aesthetics, but the actual work itself, if you actually look at the themes in his work, they're kind of like quite light in a lot of respects. It's kind of like there's a juxtaposition with that. I mean, I'm especially kind of thinking about the cat comic that you did for your girlfriend. That's got kind of quite dark aesthetics, but the actual themes and the humor are quite light-handed and just kind of like a light touch, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, I like that.
The other thing that obviously did not kind of actually going back to the theme of darkness within your own work, there is that I did notice a little bit of abstract body horror stuff, especially in Mindlurker. This idea of this shadow creature almost imprisoning the main character, and you do kind of mention David Lynch as well, so I just wondering if you maybe talk a little bit about that.
Really inspired by Eraserhead. That film is actually quite one of the reasons I really like to work in monochrome as opposed to doing all of these big coloured illustrations. But the thing I liked about it was the way that he, with the abstract body horror, it's like a symbolic kind of thing. It's not there just for the sake of it. It's like, I don't know, it's like a symbol, a metaphor. So like with the creature that lives in the guy's head, I was kind of thinking of stuff like because it's a memory literally inside the head, I suppose. Doesn't sound that great when I break it down like that. It worked visually, I think.
Your work is really visually striking. I love the fact that you do use kind of the monochrome aesthetic, kind of using color very sparingly. I think that's quite effective. The other thing that I quite enjoy about the aesthetics of your work is kind of got, for me, it's kind of got quite an inky aesthetic. So I was just wondering how you came about developing that style. Was it something that you've always had in mind, or is it something that you've developed over a number of years?
Yeah, that's something I've had for quite a few years now. I think before I went to uni, I was drawing like that for a bit. I used to do like super clean illustrations with like block color, very organized lines and stuff. I don't know if those images would have been on my portfolio on Instagram because I don't think I started it up until about 2018. But then I started looking into old newspaper cartoons where I found Ralph Steadman and stuff, and I really quite loved that quite inky things he does. It's almost like a controlled chaos to it.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Sorry to cut across you. One of the things that does, I don't want to say bother me, it is the right word. A lot of digital art these days, it is too clean, and
Yeah,
there's not that you don't get that sense that a mistake might have happened on the page, or there's kind of like an organic thing that happens when you draw ink on paper that it's really difficult to replicate with digital tools, because the temptation is always there to kind of clean it up and make it look nice. Which I'm not saying that your work looks messy, but especially with some of the cross hatching that you've done in some of your work, that you don't mind if it looks a little bit rougher, if that makes sense.
yeah. No, I like work like that. I think for me, it gives me a feeling of authenticity when I see that finished page, like with like little mistakes and stuff. While I'm drawing, I'm trying to avoid as many of those as I can. But yeah, what you said about digital art, no, I agree. Is I do use some digital aspects, but I would say pretty much nearly everything on every page has been drawn by hand. The only things that I would add digitally are like screen tones, things like that would be very time consuming and a little finicky to add freehand. And I've tried drawing digitally in the past, and it could, because like you say, it doesn't have that sort of physicality element to it. It just doesn't. I just much prefer ink on paper using physical things, you know.
From what you've said there, you create mostly with kind of analog tools, pen and paper, and then do the final touches on digital tools. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, I'll work in analog, and then I will do some finishing touches with a laptop.
How do you do that? Kind of what pens and nibs and paper and stuff like that do you use?
So I can't remember what specific. I've been using cartridge paper at uni
Okay.
to save a bit of money. But yeah, it's just like a nice, slightly heavy bit of paper that won't bleed when you put the ink to it. And I mostly use a brush.
Using, I suppose you then kind of scan it with a scanner and then put it into Photoshop that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Okay, cool.
then I'll like apply a threshold or whatever just to get those blacks nice and consistent.
Yeah, one of my favorite interviews I've listened to was with the creator of Usagi Jimbo, and I can't believe his name escapes me at the moment. Anyway, he does all his work via analog, and he uses a particular type of pencil do his initial line work, and the company that made those pencils has basically shut down. So he's just hoarded like a massive stockpile of these pencils to kind of help him still create that. Is that kind of something that you worry about a little bit in terms of like, is there any kind of specialist tools or nibs or inks that you use specifically to create your art that you'd be worried about if the company shut down at some
Yeah,
point in the future?
definitely. My ink brush it's made by Pentel, which I don't think is gonna go bust anytime soon. But I have struggled to find the right cartridges and the right tips for the brush. I think I've only replaced it twice since I bought it like 4 years ago. But yeah, when the lockdowns happened and I couldn't use the art shop at uni because it was the only other place I could find it, I think I spent like an entire evening on Google trying to find the right brush. So
Yeah.
yeah, I reckon if they were about to go bust, I'd probably hoard those.
You go, yeah, no, I'm not saying the apocalypse is around the corner, but might be time to start hoarding them now.
Yeah.
Kind of, I just wanted to ask a little bit about your scripting process as well. So, do you when you're sitting down to create a comic, do you storyboard? Do you write out a full script? Do you outline a rough sketch of where you think the story is going to be going? How does that process work?
I work quite impulsively, so I find I'd rather not write like a strict script when I start because when I come to actually drawing the pages, I'll have new ideas that I'll prefer and stuff. So I write like a rough outline of what needs to happen on each page, like how one page begins and how one page ends. And then I'll it's kind of like that old Marvel way of writing where they'd be given what needs to happen and then the illustrator would like fill in everything else. Say like writing the whole story as a whole, I have like a little table of like a little 3 act structure, and it's like this is what's going to happen in the first act, how it starts, then this is what happens in the second act, this is what happens in the third act, kind of thing. So it's actually a bit how they write South Park.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they have like a big whiteboard, and they have a table with the 3 acts, and they write what needs to happen in each act, and then they'll just kind of like they'll play around just using that as a framework of where to go forward.
That to me sounds like because I write my own comics. That for me sounds like a really difficult difficult process to go through. How long does it kind of take you then to take an idea from initial conception to kind of final product?
It,
Then using that process.
I think I spent just over a month actually writing Mindlurker
Yeah,
because where I used that 3 act structure idea, I would review that, go back and change it over and over again, and sometimes I'll write myself like a synopsis of what's going to happen. Do you draw comics as well?
I don't draw. I
Yeah.
can't draw
Uh,
to save my life.
I
Well,
suppose that's probably why
yeah,
this works a bit better for me
yeah,
because I'm
yeah.
somewhat of an auteur. I can just like write and illustrate it.
And just kind of building on that point a little bit, how do you feel about collaboration? I know a lot of modern comics these days, they rely on an entire team of someone doing inking, someone doing the penciling, someone doing the lettering, the coloring, and then you've got the writer at the end. As an author, is that something that appeals to you? Do you very much kind of, if you were going to collaborate, you'd kind of want to be in charge of the process?
No, I'd quite happily collaborate. I think with the thing with Mindlurker is that it's sort of like, like my baby, so it's quite
Yeah,
nice to have the full control on that. But no, I'd be happy to collaborate with other people in future.
yeah.
Is yeah, for like my career, I've got kind of like end game plans kind of thing. So say like Junji Ito, like he writes and illustrates all of his own stuff, and it's like I would quite like to do that. Not because I'm against collaborating with other people. It just yeah, I would like to just sort of make stuff that is all my own.
And with comic books, if you can draw and you can illustrate, that is something very much that you can do yourself. I was going to ask this question a little bit later on, but I think it kind of fits nicely into here. So you kind of mentioned Junji Ito writing and drawing all of his own stuff, and that's something that appeals to you a great deal. What does success look like for you?
What does success look like for me? Comfortable place to live, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't want to be like, I don't know. It would be nice, but success to me doesn't look like being like a legend or anything. It's just sort of like what have I kind of got out of it, kind of thing is the main thing. I don't ask for much.
yeah.
Yeah.
Creatively speaking, would success look like having a regular publishing deal, or would it be kind of you having people coming to you to kind of like run Kickstarters for books that you're coming out? Kind of what would be kind of like your ideal goal in terms of, would you want to do graphic novel, kind of shorter one shot pieces? What would that be for you?
I'd love to make graphic novels. Being able to regularly bring out graphic novels and stuff. I'd love that.
Yeah. Are you involved in any like the UK comics creators community groups that are around the country at the moment?
No, I've struggled to find things like that. I don't know.
Okay,
Maybe I'm just
sure.
out of the loop.
Like that. Are you planning on going to any of the comics expos that are coming up, like Fort Bubble or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm hoping to. I'm not sure if I'll be able to like take part in them yet, but I'd love to just sort of go and check it out and see what's going on, because I want to find more comics from independent, like creators like me, basically, or
Yeah.
creators like us even.
Yeah, going to events like that are really useful. They're a great way of meeting people and just bitching about different aspects of the comics creation process and stuff like that, which is always really useful. Before we kind of move on to general conversation about comic books in general, are there any projects that you're kind of like working on at the moment outside of Mindlurker? Kind of what's coming down the line for you since you've graduated?
At the moment, I'm working in the art department on a video game. I signed an NDA.
Okay, sure, you
Yeah,
can't talk about it, that's fine. Yeah.
yeah. So I can't say what it is I'm making, but yeah, it's a indie game developer. And yeah, I've been working with them mostly. I've been freelance lately. I've done some jobs for a local magazine called The Spire. They have like an online video element that they released about 8 weeks ago. I was working with Andy Capon, the guy who runs it. I was animating the illustrations that appear in the magazine, so they're speaking in sketches. It's very different from what I normally do, though. I was taking somebody else's illustrations and bringing them to life. It's as well as doing comics. I learned a bit like of animation at uni.
How do you go around getting those commissions? Is it through word of mouth, networking, or how did those kind of like freelance jobs come about for you?
I asked for them.
You asked me.
Yeah.
Okay. that's
It's,
that's always the best way to do it. Yeah.
yeah, it's mainly just a matter of any project I've been interested in working on. I've just asked them if I can get involved. Yeah.
That's really good, rather than kind of my approach of trying to be the cool, mysterious person in the corner. Hopefully, someone will approach me to write comics for them. Which
Hey,
I
that
think
guy's
is
mysterious. I hope he wants to make
yeah.
a comic with me.
So let's talk about comic books just in general. Then, kind of what were your kind of first memories of reading comics?
I think the earliest comic books I remember reading were, my timeline is all messed up. It's either those Spider-Man comics you could like get in newsagents, or it was a graphic novel my dad got me. which was Wolverine. I think it was the Frank Miller 80s one where he
Yeah.
goes to Japan. I think they
Oh,
based
yeah.
that Wolverine film partly on that. But yeah, that was one of the my start where I started reading comics were like Marvel superheroes, and then as I got a bit older, moving into my teens, I started getting interested in manga. I was
Yeah.
reading Inuyasha.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I I loved that for ages. And nowadays I'm reading, well, mostly horror stuff. At the moment I'm reading Junji Ito's Love Sickness. Actually, me saying I'm only reading horror at the moment, that's a lie. Because I've been reading loads of Adrian Tomina as well. So I've kind of been switching between Ito and Tomina.
I should probably make a confession at this point. I've not read. Well, I've got an Ito book on my bookshelf at the moment. I haven't read it yet, and I've not read of any Tomina's work at all. So I think those are probably two things I need to check out, because I feel a lot of people mention both of those guys as major influences. So I think I'm probably missing out on something there. What draws you? What draws you to? Because they're quite different creators. Kind of, what draws you to their work?
Well, I love the artwork. That's usually the first thing you see when you're picking out a comic book. Tomina was recommended to me by my tutor. He's involved in a lot of that sort of area of comic books. The thing I like about Adrian Tomina is that he can write such authentic characters. So that's always such a draw for me while I'm reading it, is that I kind of like, even though it's like just a comic, I'm believing what I'm seeing, kind of thing. He's so good. Like one of the things I really like about Junji Ito is the page turn thing. Tomina has his own like techniques of using the comic book format to deliver those moments at the right moment. And that's something I like really love about Tomina, is the way that he can deliver the stories and present stuff. And I suppose it's the same reason I like Junji Ito so much as well. They talk about very different things, I suppose.
Anything you read kind of influences what you go on to create later on. Is that something you're very aware of when you're creating your own stuff? Not to kind of not necessarily even paying tribute, but just making sure that it's not aping too closely stuff that you've read recently.
Yeah, I do worry, like sort of like what like, as in, where's the line between inspiration and just being a product of your inspirations or something.
Does music play a big part in your life in terms of how you go around creating work? Is there kind of a soundtrack to the stuff that you're creating at the moment?
Yeah, I guess so, in a way. It's not like wouldn't really say like it's really like bands though that are playing a part in music that inspires me while writing. I don't really listen to music much while I'm working anyway, because it distracts me a bit.
Yeah.
But I definitely have like ideas while listening to music. I was listening while I was writing and making Mindlurker. I was listening to the Silent Hill soundtrack. Silent Hill
Oh,
2.
okay.
It's quite ambient. It's quite nice if you're out on a walk. It's even though it's like a little eerie and a little spooky, some of the tracks are actually just really nice. So that kind of inspired me quite a bit. Layers of Fear 2. I don't know if you've heard of that game.
No, I've not heard of that game. You're the
Uh,
first person who's mentioned like soundtracks as inspiration. I kind of find that quite refreshing, because like, most of the music I listen to is basically soundtracks from either films, games,
hmm.
or pro wrestling entrance music. So it's kind of nice to meet someone who's got similar tastes.
Is that your alarm in the morning?
Yeah. You smell what the rock is cooking. No,
It's eggs.
if I was to start off with Tomine or Junji Ito, where would you recommend that I start with either of those two?
Tomine, I reckon, start off with Killing and Dying, I suppose. Is that's one of his short story collections. There's a moment in that which is quite impactful. So that's like a really good read if you sort of want to see Tomina. I think that's one of the comics where Tomina is definitely at his best. To start off with Junji Ito, I started off with Spiral.
Yeah, a lot of people
Yeah,
mention spirals.
everyone
Spirals.
starts off with Spiral, I think.
Yeah.
But what's the one I'm thinking of? Because there's always like something that comes to mind. I might have to message it to you. Even it's on my bookshelf, but it's like around the corner from me.
Yeah.
If I just, because I love his short story collections. as well. I think it's either Smashed or Shiver, which I
Okay,
think would also be a really good starting point. If, but then again, Spiral is his magnum opus. So
yeah.
yeah,
Is Spiral, is that coming to like Netflix or something as a animation, or did I misremember
yeah. No,
that?
that's it's going to Adult Swim
Oh, Adult
as an
Swim.
anime.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's quite interesting when manga is transferred over to anime, because they are quite different formats, even though they share kind of a lot of the similar aesthetics, kind of what editorial changes they're going to have to make. And I'm really worried about the Sandman adaptation, because a lot of those most impactful moments in, something like Sandman, or whatever, it is about that still image, and
yeah.
that's really difficult to capture with moving images. So it'll be kind of interesting how they go about adapting that. You kind of mentioned your love of horror comics. Are there any other horror comics that you would recommend people checking out?
The Number by Thomas Ott. That was
Yeah.
yes, OTT. That's a really good comic. It's a silent comic with these like gorgeous scratchboard illustrations throughout about a man's obsession with numbers. That was really interesting to read. I've read through that a couple of times now, I think, actually. What else would I recommend? Yeah, Thomas Ott and Black Hole, Charles Burns.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's a weird.
It's
Bit,
so weird.
yeah, it's a strange thing, and
It's kind of like that A24 brand of horror, I think, where
yes, I
yeah.
think so. Very much, yeah. I kind of made the mistake of opening that up on a crowded tube train, and I think some people must have thought I was a bit of a pervert or something.
It's like, what the hell? This guy's
Yeah,
into cocktails.
yeah, yeah. Really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from the sound of it, you tend. Do you read a lot, most of your comics kind of in kind of the analog paper form? Did you read any kind of digital comics at all, or comics in a digital format?
I've read, well, aside from like the comics you find on Instagram and stuff, I think I've read like one digital comic. Is when I was first getting interested in like Junji Ito and stuff, I wanted to just like demo some of his work, and you can actually find his short stories for free on Reddit.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
that was I think that was the first and only webcomic I've ever read. It's kind of the same way I feel about drawing. I like having that book in my hands, and you can't beat that new book smell and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. I was very much in the similar camp until I started reviewing comic books and stuff like that, and then I don't have the space for all of them. I need to use my iPad.
yeah,
I need to use my iPad to read a lot of them, and there is something to be said about it. I think well, there's two camps really, and I think it's a bit of a longer conversation. But I think if you're creating something digitally, then it should be created specifically to take advantage of what you can do digitally. So, I had this conversation a while back about Electrocomics, which played around with digital effects in terms of panel layouts and dialogue boxes appearing and stuff like that. I think that's something that you could definitely take more advantage of in the future if you wanted to create digital comics. But my main pet peeve is like the double page layout. Is kind of, it's not the same reading that digitally as it is in a book, where you kind of like, you open that spread and it's just kind of like across everywhere. So yeah, that's that's the other pain with reading digitally. It's definitely something you could explore, because I think there are a lot of great web comics out there and a lot of great horror web comics as well. You did a degree in kind of comics and animation. Is there any kind of animations that have specifically inspired you, that you enjoyed kind of like growing up as well, or was kind of like comic books kind of always your first love?
yeah. Comic books was definitely my first love. Animation wise, I don't know. I watch a lot of like anime, like
Yeah,
Studio Ghibli. Netflix has some surprisingly good anime on it. Yeah, because often Netflix originals can be really hit and miss, but their anime is surprisingly consistent. There's
yeah.
not like a huge amount of animators that really spring to mind when I'm thinking about like inspirations and stuff that I don't think people wouldn't have heard of before.
Yeah,
Like Studio Ghibli, Rick and Morty, obviously,
yeah.
obviously. I don't know what the word I was looking for was. Strangely enough, I suppose is the word I was looking for. That's I find the animation on that show somehow like really impressive. Just they get it's like it's the gore that interests me in a weird way
Yeah,
because I know that's something really hard to draw.
yeah,
So animating it must be so difficult. I
yeah.
find that quite impressive.
So, what are you going to be up to next in terms of kind of the projects that you're kind of working on? Are you're extending Mindlurker? Are there any other projects that you're free to talk about that aren't NDA'd? Oh,
There's the new the additions to Mindlurker are already written out. So at the moment, I've got like a bunch of story ideas written out, and I'm gonna pick which one to start working on next. So once Mindlurker is drawn and it's published, there'll be another one pretty soon after that. I'm gonna throw up an Etsy shop in about a week, which like we were talking about the self-publishing might be where I'm selling my comics in the future. So keep an eye out for that.
and kind of the projects that you're going to be working on, are they going to be long form, short form? Kind of, have you got any idea in terms of what you're going to be doing with that?
Short form, I reckon. Like with Mindlurker is its own self-contained story. There won't be a sequel to it.
Yeah,
Because I quite like just having a self-contained story all in one, even if it's a bit longer.
yeah,
Um, you know, maybe I'll release the next one episodically rather than all at once.
yeah. I think
Um,
that's definitely a solid idea to think about
yeah.
doing that, because it just gives you time to breathe as well creatively when you're doing it kind of episodically, and time to breathe, but also gives you kind of a firm schedule to keep to.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
as well, rather than trying to get it all out in one lump thing
Yeah, because when your
at the
schedule
moment.
is, I'll release this in 6 months, you spend about two of those months not really
Doing
doing all
absolutely,
that
yeah, doing
much. Yeah.
kind of like doing bollocks all. So, is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have?
No, no.
Okay,
I don't know if we
cool.
really talked about what Mind Lurk is about. I feel like
Oh yeah, yeah.
we,
Let's
yeah.
talk a little bit about Mindlurker. So, kind of give me the. Oh God, someone's hoovering. Nothing I can do about that. Tell me a little bit about what Mindlurker is about. What's the kind of like elevator pitch for it?
So Tristan and Morgan are two recovering addicts, and Mind Lurker is about sort of their final chapters, sort of in their recovery. So Tristan explores what it is that he's been running from this whole time, and Morgan's going through a similar journey. She finds that there were things that she perhaps hadn't considered about her own recovery before as well.
We kind of, I don't want to give too much away about the comic, but we essentially start off with our lead character kind of stuck in a room. Essentially, is that something that came across from your own experience, or was that kind of more like a original idea?
Like I said, it's based on my own experience with the thing. I think I spent almost an entire year shut inside while sort of getting over those last hurdles. So that's kind of the point where this story starts. Is Tristan's coming over those last hurdles, and it's made him agoraphobic in a way. His sort of experiences, withdrawals, and the effects that it's having on his mind and stuff.
You mentioned you kind of reworking that because time constraints. You had to take some stuff out. What I kind of always find it interesting when people do go back to their work and kind of remix it a little bit. What about the bits that you're putting back in are so important to you that you feel that it's kind of necessary to go back and put those bits back in, if it makes sense?
So Morgan, the girl that appears at the beginning and the end of the comic, she was meant to have her own storyline, and I took that out just to streamline the project. It's like when you're doing a creative project for a degree, there's so many other things you need to take into account rather than when you're creating it outside. Like you've got like quotas, like experimentation and research quotas to meet and stuff like that. So I cut aspects of the storyline out so that I could tick the boxes, as it were. But in my feedback at the end of the unit, they said Morgan was underdeveloped. So I was like, I know.
Yeah, that's
So I'm putting
yeah.
her back
I mean,
in.
yeah. Okay, so that's kind of the
Mm.
reason. The reason for doing it. And when do you think that's going to be ready?
Oh, well, because I've got to arrange publishing and stuff as well. But I'm hoping for it to release before the end of the year.
Okay.
So
Okay.
what we got, like 4 months left of the year. So
Yeah.
within 4 months is what I'm hoping for.
Okay,
'Cause,
we're going to hold you to that deadline and
yeah,
harass you on social media.
everyone's going to be
If
watching me. Where's Mindlurker?
yeah,
Why are we
where's
harassing
mine?
this guy? I don't know.
And
um,
how did you come up with the title Mindlurker? Where did that name come from?
I was trying to think of ways to, well, because the creature at the end is a repressed memory. I was trying to think of a way to phrase that in a way that's not as on the nose and maybe sounds a little ambiguous and like a little creepy, I guess. So I landed on Mindlurker in the end. I did have a couple of different like working titles for it, some of which just really didn't fit at all. It was going to be called Rot at one point,
Okay,
and
I think
that doesn't fit at all.
Mindlurker is a much better name if you don't mind me. If you don't mind me
No, thank
saying,
you.
it's a very unique name and kind of very descriptive and evocative without giving away too much about what the Mindlurker actually is, which I think it's a great title. It's a really
Thank
good
you.
title.
Great.
Okay, yeah, actually being aware of the title. Where can people find you on the internet and Instagram, Facebook, website, all that good stuff?
All of my social medias are under Benedict Abbit. I've got a website, benedictabbit.co.uk, usually stylized as one word, except for Facebook. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. I'm around.
This is a question I'm starting to ask illustrators that I do have on the program. Are you open for commissions at the moment?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, cool. So get in touch with Benedict if you want something drawn. Okay, guys, that's it for this episode. Thank you very much, Benedict, for coming on and talking to me. Is really good to hear about your creative process and kind of the comic books that inspired you. I've no idea who I'm going to be interviewing next or what comic book we're going to be doing, but I'll let you guys know over the social media. Let's say bye to the listeners. Benedict, bye.
Bye, guys.